All right, ladies and gentlemen, Coach Goo back here once again with another fun-filled, action-packed, non-flipped Algebra 2 classroom video. Feeling a little irked, you know what that means? It means a little annoyed because I just recorded this whole video and realized that I didn't screen record. Oh my goodness. All right, so anyways, today we're doing function operations. That means operations with functions. Wow, who could have guessed that? But let's warm ourselves up with a little word problem to get our brains firing. Check this one out. Chris, this boy Chris plans to kayak with his girlfriend. Not my first choice of activity, but kayak rentals in the Woodlands are $15 for the first hour, plus $5 per additional hour. $15 is known as the fixed cost because you're always paying that $15 and it includes the first hour, while $5 is a variable cost. So we're going to write a function to represent the cost of the kayak rental. So take a second to try your hand at this one. All right, so the answer was f of x, that's the function, right, equals, remember $15 is a fixed cost. It's always costing $15. That includes the first hour. And we're adding on $5 for every hour. Let's say x is the hours, but it's past the first hour. So let's subtract that first hour. We're not counting that one. And this is the function that will get you the cost of his hot date. All right, anyways, yeah. Notation. Notation is really important when you're working with functions because if you don't know how to read this or what it even says, you're not going to be able to do the problem. So here are some common notations for function operations. Check this one out. F plus g of x is the same thing as saying f of x plus g of x. F minus g of x is the same thing as saying f of x minus g of x. F times g of x is the same thing as saying f of x times g of x. And lastly, f over g of x is the same thing as saying f of x over g of x. But there's a catch. You can't have g of x equals 0. Why can that bottom function not be 0? Because you cannot, I repeat, not divide by 0. All right, so see down here? You cannot divide by 0. The top one, f of x, that can be 0 because who cares? The top one's whatever. The bottom one, though, you cannot divide by 0. We learned that since way back when. Might have forgotten it, but that's the rule. Let's take a look at some examples then. Function operations. First, we're going to start with adding and subtracting functions. I'm going to zoom this one in a bit. Check this out. F of x is 4x plus 7, and g of x is 12 plus x. Let's do A. We're going to find f plus g of x. First, what does that even mean? F plus g of x, remember, is the same thing as saying what? F of x plus g of x. You know what? Let's color code this. Let's just go the extra mile for you guys. Let's color code this, man. G of x. And then we're going to do this. Look. Oh, man. And then a little bit of this. Oh, yeah. Okay, so now let's replace what we know. F of x is right here, 4x plus 7. And we're going to put that in parentheses just to keep it together, you know, to keep it together. Plus sign, plus g of x. G of x is 12 plus x. We're going to put that in parentheses as well to keep it together so things don't get separated. All right, nothing crazy here, so we're just going to combine the like terms. So we've got 4x plus x. What's 4x plus x, y'all? 5x, so that's 5x. And then we got 7 plus 12. 7 plus 12 is 19, so plus 19. And that means f plus g of x is the same thing as 5x plus 19. There we go. Let's do f minus g of x. This one's a little different, and this is where the parentheses really come in handy because watch this. F minus g of x is the same thing as saying f of x minus g of x. All right, let's replace what we know. F of x is 4x plus 7. Then we got the minus sign. And then g of x is 12 plus x. What do you think happens with this negative sign outside of the parentheses here? it goes to everything inside the parentheses, the 12. It's like, give me one. X is like, give me one too. So we give the negative sign to both of them. And this turns into 4x plus 7 minus 12 minus x. So now let's combine the like terms. What's 4x minus x? That's going to be 3x. And then we've got 7 minus 12. That's negative 5. 3x minus 5. And that is my answer. Now you'll notice both of these problems say state the domain. That's saying what are the possible values of x. So it's anything that gives you an output when you put x in. Really, the thing that I can think of at this particular moment where this would apply is when you have a fraction. Remember, g of x cannot equal 0 on the fraction, but right here we have no fractions, so x can be all real numbers. There we go. C, find f plus g of 3. We already found f plus g of x. Remember, f plus g of x was, let me scroll up to my notes, 5x plus 19. Remember, we found that out. But this time, it's f plus g of 3. So we're going to replace the x with a 3. So 5 times 3 plus 19. What's 5 times 3? That is 15 plus the 19. What's 15 plus 19? 34. So 34 is the answer right here. F plus g of 3 is 34. Moving on, here we go to multiplying and dividing functions. All right, find f of x times 2g of x. Whoa, that's a new one, times 2g of x. So let's just see what this is saying. Let's do the color coding. There's f of x, and here's g of x. So it's telling me to do f of x times 2g of x. So f of x is x squared minus 9. So I'm going to go ahead and write that in the parentheses. X squared minus 9 times, it says 2g of x. So I'm going to put the 2, and then parentheses, g of x is x plus 3. Now the first thing we're going to do here is distribute the 2 to the x and the 3. So let's go ahead and change this. So now we've got, next step, we've got x squared minus 9 times, well, let's get rid of that. And then what is 2 times x? That is 2x. And what is 2 times 3? That's 6. So it's going to be 2x plus 6 inside the parentheses now. Now to multiply these out, we need to FOIL. So it's going to be first, outside, inside, last. So we're going to do like this. First, we're going to go with x squared times 2x. That's the first. X squared times 2x is 2x cubed. All right, now we're going to go outside. So we're going to go x squared times 6. That is going to be 6x squared, so plus 6x squared. Now we're going to go inside. So the negative 9 times the 2x. Negative 9 times 2x is negative 18x. So we're going to put minus 18x. And lastly, we're going for the last. So negative 9 times 6 is negative 54. So minus 54. And that is my answer right here. Boom. 2x cubed plus 6x squared minus 18x minus 54. The domain, we don't see any fractions here, so it's going to be all real numbers. Next up, let's do dividing functions. Here we have a fraction, so first things first, let's go ahead and write it out. F of x is going to be x squared minus 9 over g of x, which is x plus 3. Now remember, the bottom, g of x, this cannot equal 0. So let's see what values x cannot equal. So what we're going to do is take g of x, x plus 3, and set that equal to 0. This, when I solve for x, is going to tell me what x can't be. So I'm going to subtract 3 from both sides, and we see x equals negative 3. If x equals negative 3, then this bottom value right here, g of x, is going to be 0. And we cannot have that because we cannot divide by 0. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and write the domain now. Domain is going to be all real numbers except negative 3. So x equals all real numbers except negative 3. I'm going to go ahead and take care of the domain now. Now we actually have to work this out. So you should see that this is a difference of squares. That's when the first number right here is a square number, and the second number is also a square number. And there's a minus sign in between, and that's going to go like this. X plus 3, X minus 3. And it's going to be over g of x, which is x plus 3. Do we see any shared terms? I see x plus 3 on top and x plus 3 on the bottom. So we can cancel those out. Boom, boom. And that leaves me with x minus 3 as my answer. So f of x over g of x is x minus 3. And the domain is everything except negative 3. All right, we're going to do one last example here. These are just the basics. F times g of 2. All right, look at C. There's a hard way to do this and an easy way to do this. So we're going to do the simpler way. Remember, f of g of 2 is the same thing as saying f of 2 times what? Times g of 2. We can see up here f of x equals x squared minus 9. So let's find out what f of 2 is going to be. F of 2 equals, we're going to replace the x with the 2, so 2 squared minus 9. What is 2 squared? 2 squared is 4 minus 9. What's 4 minus 9? Negative 5. All right, now g of 2, that's going to be x plus 3. So g of 2 is we're gonna replace the x with a 2, so it's gonna be 2 plus what am I writing? Plus 3. What's 2 plus 3? Let me get my fingers out for this one. 1, 2, add 3, 3, 4, 5. There we go, 5. So now all we have to do is take these two answers and multiply them together, because that's what our original function says to do. So my final answer is gonna be negative 5 times 5, and that is negative 25. Boom. So when you have something like this, you can find the two answers separately first and then find your final answer. And that's going to conclude these notes over function operations. So I will see you in the next one. Peace!